A carriage stops in front of a wooden homestead. Dust settles. A man steps forward, hat in hand, heart hammering. He's been waiting 8 months for this moment. 8 months of letters to a woman named Clara, who promised a quiet understanding, who saw the goodness in a simple life, who didn't mind that his world was one of hard work and silence. The door opens. What steps down isn't Clara. What steps down is a woman nearly 2 heads taller than him, with shoulders broader than his, wearing trail-worn leather, and a single bag slung over her shoulder. She looks down at him. He looks up at her. Neither speaks. But in that silence, something impossible has just begun. And what neither of them knows yet is that this wasn't an accident. Someone arranged this deliberately. Someone who stands to profit from a lonely rancher looking weak and vulnerable. And that someone is watching from the hills, waiting to see if his plan will work. Elias Morgan stood frozen on his own porch. The latest letter from Clara was still warm from his reading it that morning, the carefully rehearsed greeting dying in his throat. The woman who'd stepped down from the carriage wasn't just tall. She was a force of nature. Her legs were long and powerful, her arms corded with muscle that shifted under her tunic. Sun-bleached hair, the color of wheat, was tied roughly back from a face etched with wind and sun. And when she turned those piercing blue eyes on him, he felt like a rabbit caught in a hawk's shadow. The driver didn't wait for a fare. He simply tossed her bag into the dirt, snapped the reins, and urged the horses into a quick retreat, desperate to be gone from the tension thickening the air. The carriage rattled away, leaving only silence and the whisper of the wind through the dry grass. Elias's nearest neighbor was a full day's ride. The town where he'd found the matrimonial agency was half a day south. There was no one to witness this moment except the 2 of them and the vast, empty plains stretching to the horizon. She didn't move, just stood there, her bag at her feet, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. Not anger, not confusion, something deeper. Something that looked like a weary acceptance of a bitter fate. He should say something, anything. But his tongue felt thick, his mind a perfect blank. He'd prepared for shyness. He'd prepared for awkwardness. He hadn't prepared for this for her, for the way she seemed to command the very air, blocking out the sky behind her. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower than he expected, raspy like stone on stone. "You're Elias Morgan." It wasn't a question. He nodded anyway, his throat too dry for words. "I'm Brenna." She picked up her bag with one hand, lifting it as if it were filled with feathers. There's been a mistake. The words should have brought relief, should have given him an exit, a way to explain that yes, obviously there had been some terrible confusion with the agency, that she was meant for someone else, somewhere else. But instead, what came out was, "Where were you supposed to go?" Something flickered across her face. Nowhere. She looked past him at the homestead, at the small barn, at the few head of cattle grazing in the distance. "This was the address I was given. But you were expecting someone else." "Clara," he heard himself say. Her name was Clara. He trailed off, because how could he finish that sentence? She was supposed to be soft-spoken and gentle and small, everything you're not. Brenna's jaw tightened just slightly. She'd heard the unspoken words anyway. "I can wait until morning. Then I'll leave." Wait. The word came out sharper than he'd intended. She paused, 1 foot already on the first porch step, and that's when he saw it. The way her shoulders were set in a rigid line. The way she held her head too high. The way someone stands when they're used to being turned away, but would rather break than show it. "Where will you go?" he asked. She didn't answer. And in that silence, Elias understood. She had nowhere to go. Clara had a life, a family, a somewhere. Brenna had only this wrong address and a single bag that probably held her entire world. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire. In an hour, it would be dark. In 2, the cold would set in, deep and biting. He thought about sending her away. Thought about the scandal, if anyone found out. Thought about how insignificant he felt standing next to her. How laughably mismatched they were. Then he thought about her standing alone in the vast, unforgiving darkness, with nowhere to go. "There's a room in the back," he said quietly. It's not much, but it's clean. You can stay tonight. In the morning, we'll figure something out. Brenna turned to look at him fully then, and for the first time, something in her expression softened. Not gratitude exactly, something more complicated, something that looked like she was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. One night, she said. One night, he agreed. But as she walked past him into his home, her arm brushing his shoulder and making him feel the sheer, solid difference between them in a way that sent a jolt straight to his core, Elias Morgan had the distinct feeling that one night was a lie they were both telling themselves. What Elias didn't see was the figure on the ridge, a spyglass pressed to his eye. The man, Jedediah Crow, lowered the glass, a slow, venomous smile spreading across his face. Everything was unfolding perfectly. The morning sun cut a harsh line across the floorboards. Elias woke to the scent of wood smoke and frying salt pork, smells that were foreign in his own kitchen. He sat up, the previous day's events crashing back into him. Her, Brenna. When Elias entered the main room, Brenna was at the stove, her back a broad wall of muscle and faded leather. She tied her hair back, and the morning light traced the powerful cords of her forearms as she worked. 2 plates sat on the rough-hewn table. She hadn't rearranged the furniture or pried into his things. She'd simply made breakfast. A small, profound gesture in the silence. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. I will go after I eat. No pleasantries. Just the same resigned finality from the day before. Elias pulled out a chair, his hands trembling slightly. He hated the visible sign of his unease. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Brenna served the food with steady hands, her movements efficient and sure. You paid for a wife. I am not what you paid for. The bluntness was a physical blow. Elias wanted to deny it, to be the better man, but it would be a lie. He did mind. He minded that every man in the territory would see them, and no Elias Morgan wasn't man enough for a woman like this. He minded that Brenna's sheer presence made him feel like a boy playing dress-up in his dead uncle's clothes. But he also minded the image of this woman, cast out and alone, walking into the emptiness with nowhere to go. Where will you go? Elias asked again, the same futile question. Brenna set the cast-iron skillet down with a definitive thud. Why do you ask what you already know the answer to? Because you won't say it. Their eyes locked, and Elias saw a fissure in her stoic armor. A glimpse of raw pain. My family cast me out. The agency in Tucson took the last of my money for the placement fee. I have no people, no home, no place in this world. Each word was a stone dropped into the quiet between them. Does that answer your question? Elias felt the air leave his lungs. Cast out. The term held a weight he could scarcely fathom. His own solitude was a choice. Brenna's was a sentence. Why? Her jaw tightened. I am a half-breed. My father was a white trapper. To my mother's people, I was never one of them. To your people, I will never be anything but a savage. I am too much of one world, and not enough of the other. I did not fit, so I was removed. She picked up her fork, her grip tight. The agency promised a man who needed strong hands, not a soft wife. They lied. I didn't know, Elias said, his voice low. Of course you didn't. Brenna looked at him, a direct challenge in her dark eyes. You wanted Clara. Small, quiet. A woman who would make you feel bigger. A woman who would not challenge the space you take up in the world. The truth of it stung. Yes, Elias admitted, because dishonesty felt like a greater insult. I wanted that. Something shifted in her expression. Not anger, but a flicker of respect for the honesty. Then we agree. I will eat, and then I will leave. But before Elias could form a response, the sound of horses, too many, and moving too fast, cut through the morning. Brenna was at the window in an instant, her body transforming from resigned guest to something primal and alert. You are expecting company? No. Elias joined her, his stomach clenching at the sight of 5 riders. He recognized 2 of them, rough hands from the settlement. The other 3 were strangers. The man leading them was Jedediah Crow, the land agent who had arranged the correspondence with Clara, the man who had taken Elias's money. "That is the man who gave me the ticket to come here," Brenna said, her voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. Elias's blood ran cold. "That's the man who was supposed to send me Clara." They looked at each other, and the terrible truth settled over them. They had not been mistaken. They had been maneuvered. Jedediah Crow dismounted with a politician's smile, his clothes too fine for the dust of the homestead. The 4 men with him remained in their saddles, hands resting near their gun belts. A show of force. Elias stepped onto the porch before Crow could reach the door. "Mr. Crow, wasn't expecting you." "No, I imagine you weren't." Crow's eyes slid past Elias to the window, to the shadow of Brenna behind the glass. "I see you received my consignment. Hope she's to your satisfaction." The mockery was thinly veiled. "There's been a mistake," Elias said, heat rising in his chest. "The woman you sent isn't Clara." "No mistake." Crow produced a folded paper from his coat with a theatrical flourish. "The contract states I provide you with a willing partner for matrimony. It says nothing of pedigree." He gestured dismissively toward the house. "Strong, that one. Good for hard labor. You should be thanking me." One of the riders behind him snickered. The sound grated on Elias's last nerve. "I paid for Clara," Elias stated, keeping his voice level. "The woman I wrote to for a year. Clara found a better prospect." Crow shrugged. "It happens. But business is business, Morgan. I held up my end. You have a partner. Now about this land." There it was. The true purpose laid bare. "The land isn't for sale." "I didn't say it was." Crow tucked the paper away. "But certain interests have their eye on this valley. That creek is a valuable asset. And you're just one man. It seems a waste of potential." "Still not for sale." Crow's smile thinned. "Are you certain? Because word travels fast. The news that Elias Morgan is shacking up with a savage will spread through that settlement like wildfire. They won't take kindly to it. Life could become very difficult for you. Is that a threat?" "An observation." Crow turned to leave, then paused. "Though I will say if an accident were to befall you out here, all alone, with no one to verify the facts, well, this land would go to auction quickly. And accidents are so common on a ranch." The riders shifted, one of them placing his hand squarely on his revolver. The air grew thick with the promise of violence. The cabin door opened. Brenna stepped onto the porch, and the entire dynamic shattered. She didn't speak. She simply stood there, her height and breadth an unspoken challenge, her gaze fixed on Crow with an intensity that made the land agent take an involuntary step back. The horses of Crow's men skittered nervously. "You should leave," Brenna said, her voice the low calm before storm. Crow recovered, a sneer twisting his features. "The animal speaks. Charming." He mounted his horse, looking down on them with contempt. "You have 3 days, Morgan. 3 days to see reason and sell. After that, well, like I said, accidents happen." They rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving Elias and Brenna standing together. Elias's hands were shaking, not from fear of Brenna now, but from a boiling rage at his own powerlessness. "He engineered this," Brenna said quietly. "He sent me here to make you a target. A man alone is one thing. A man with a half-breed woman is an easy problem to solve." Elias wanted to argue, but the truth was a cold stone in his gut. 3 days, he echoed. Brenna looked at him, a new, calculating light in her eyes. "Or we give them a reason to be afraid." Before Elias could ask what she meant, she turned and went inside, leaving him with the chilling certainty that their fragile one-night truce had just erupted into a war. The afternoon demanded work that wouldn't wait. A line of fence posts on the north pasture had rotted through. Elias gathered his tools, expecting the solitary labor that defined his life. But when he started walking, Brenna fell into step beside him, picking up the spare sledgehammer without a word. Her long strides forced him to a quicker pace. For the first hour, they worked in silence. Elias dug out the old posts, the blisters on his hands reopening. Brenna carried the new, 70-pound posts 2 at a time, walking the uneven ground as if they were weightless. Elias tried not to watch, tried not to feel the burn of his own physical inadequacy, as he wrestled with the post-hole digger. Brenna sank a post into the earth with 3 brutal, efficient strikes. Elias watched, feeling like a child. Brenna paused mid-swing. "You dig a straighter hole," she said. It was a kindness, a lie they both saw through. But the offer of it touched something in Elias. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know," Brenna replied, wiping sweat from her brow with her arm. "But I am here. The work is here." She went back to it. The silence between them softened, becoming less strained, almost companionable. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues, Elias felt a tension in his shoulders he hadn't even known was there begin to ease. "Why this life?" Brenna asked suddenly. "If you are not built for this work, why choose it?" The question should have been an insult, but her tone was pure curiosity. Elias considered his answer. "The land was my uncle's. He had no children. I was the only family left. I could have sold it, gone to a city. But this..." He looked out at the vast, open territory. "This felt like the only place I could ever belong." "Alone," Brenna said. Yes, Elias met her gaze. "Alone was easier than trying to fit where I never would." Brenna was quiet for a long moment. "My mother's people tolerated me as a child. But when I grew, when I became this," she gestured to her own body, "I was a walking reminder of my mother's transgression. I was not one of them. I never had been." She drove a new post into the ground with controlled fury. "I thought perhaps among your kind, my size would not matter, that I could find place." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Then I saw your face when I stepped from the coach." Shame washed over Elias. "I'm sorry." "Do not be." Brenna looked at him directly, and Elias saw something softer there than before. "You are honest. Most people only stare and whisper." The work was done. The sun kissed the horizon. Neither of them moved to leave. "I've never fit anywhere either," Elias admitted, the words feeling both dangerous and freeing. "Too small. Too weak. Too quiet. Never the man I was supposed to be." Brenna studied him, and for the first time, Elias felt no judgment in her gaze. "Perhaps that is why Crow chose us. 2 people who do not fit. Easy to break. Or maybe," Elias heard himself say, the words leaving his mouth before his mind could censor them, "2 people who don't fit anywhere might fit right here." The words hung in the cooling air. Elias couldn't believe he'd said it. But looking at Brenna, at the slight widening of her eyes, the barely perceptible catch in her breath, he didn't want to take them back. Before Brenna could respond, the sharp crack of splintering glass shattered the moment. They both turned toward the homestead. Smoke was rising from the barn. Elias ran, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The horses. All 3 were trapped inside. He could already hear their panic screams. Brenna reached the barn first, her long legs devouring the distance. She didn't hesitate, just yanked her bandana over her nose and plunged into the smoke boiling from the doorway. Elias followed, but the heat was a physical wall, searing his lungs. The fire, set near the hay store, was already climbing the support beams, its roar deafening. He heard Brenna moving inside, heard the thunder of hooves and terrified whinnies. The first horse burst past him, eyes white with fear, Brenna's hand a brief guide on its flank. The animal fled into the open. Brenna turned and vanished back into the inferno without a second's pause. Elias tried to push deeper, but a coughing fit bent him double. The smoke was a blinding, choking fog. He heard the second stall door crash open, heard Brenna's voice, low and steady, speaking in a tongue he didn't know, words of calm and command. The second horse galloped past. 1 left. Gasping, Elias pushed forward, the heat intensifying. A beam cracked overhead, raining sparks. He saw Brenna struggling with the last horse, a stubborn mare named Belle, who was rearing and striking out in her terror. Brenna couldn't get close enough to her halter. Elias didn't think. He knew this horse. He'd raised her from a foal. He started talking, his voice a ragged but familiar thread in the chaos. "Easy, Belle. Easy, girl." Her ears flicked toward him. She was still wild with fear, but his voice was an anchor. He moved slowly, hands outstretched, and she allowed him to get to her stall door, to slide the bolt. The moment it was free, Brenna was there, using her raw strength to force her head toward the exit. Together, they manhandled the frantic animal out into the life-giving air. They stumbled out after her, collapsing onto the dirt, coughing, their faces streaked with soot and ash. The barn was a lost cause, a roaring pyre against the darkening sky. Elias sank to his knees, lungs on fire, hands trembling with adrenaline and despair. The barn, the hay, the tools, months of work gone. Brenna stood beside him, breathing heavily, her powerful frame outlined against the flames. She looked like a warrior goddess, while Elias knelt broken. "This was no accident," Brenna said, her voice rough from the smoke. Elias knew it. The timing was too perfect. "They'll be back," he whispered. "And it will be worse." Brenna looked down at him, her expression fierce. "Then we make sure they remember the cost." She offered her hand. Elias stared at it, at the strength in that soot-blackened grip. Then he took it. He let Brenna pull him to his feet, feeling the effortless power in the motion. Standing before the ruin, their hands still clasped, Elias felt a fundamental shift within himself. This woman, a stranger, had just risked her life for animals that weren't hers. For a man she owed nothing. "Why?" Elias asked, his voice raw. "Why would you do that? For this place? For me?" Brenna didn't let go. "Because for the first time, a man looked at me and did not see a problem to be solved. You gave me shelter. You treated me as a person." She squeezed his fingers, the calluses on her palm rough against his skin. "And I am tired of running from those who wish to break me for being different." The fire roared behind them. In the distance, the horses huddled together, safe. Elias looked at Brenna, and he no longer saw the woman who had ruined his plans. He saw the woman who had saved everything that mattered. "Stay," Elias said. "Not for one night. Stay." Brenna's eyes searched his face. "You understand what that means? Crow will use it. The settlement will turn on you. You choose me over all of it." "I know," Elias said. And he did. But standing there with his world in ashes and Brenna's hand in his, the choice was the simplest thing in the world. "Stay anyway." Brenna smiled then, small and genuine, and it transformed her entire being. Somewhere in the darkness, the man who had set the fire was watching. He had underestimated what could be forged in the fire of shared desperation. The war was on. But Elias Morgan was no longer alone. They spent the next day fortifying the homestead. Brenna moved with a predator's grace, assessing sightlines, reinforcing doors, turning the simple cabin into a defensible position. Elias watched, feeling useless. Brenna was the warrior. He was just the man who talked to horses. That evening, they sat by a small fire outside, the smell of smoke still clinging to the air. The stars were a brilliant, cold tapestry above. Brenna sharpened an old skinning knife she'd found, the scrape of steel on stone a rhythmic promise of violence. "They will come tomorrow," Brenna said. "Crow will not wait." "I know." Elias poked at the fire. "I'm sorry you're tangled in this." "I chose to stay," Brenna replied, not looking up from a blade. "These are my battles now. He used me as a weapon against you. That makes it personal." They lapsed into silence. Elias wanted to bridge the gap between them, to articulate the strange, fierce feeling growing in his chest, but the words stuck in his throat. "You should sleep," Brenna said. "I will keep watch." "You need rest too. I am accustomed to little sleep." Brenna stood and stretched, her silhouette immense against the starry sky. Something tightened in Elias's chest. He stood too, meaning to go inside. But before he could move, Brenna's hand shot out, grabbing his arm and yanking him down hard. They hit the ground as a fist-sized rock whistled through the air where Elias's head had been, cracking against the cabin wall. Brenna was on her feet in an instant. "There." She pointed to a ridge 50 yards out. Elias saw shadows moving. 2, maybe 3 men. Another rock flew, aimed at Brenna. She dodged it, but the attack forced her away from Elias. The strategy was clear: separate and isolate. More rocks came, a relentless barrage, pushing Brenna farther from the cabin's cover. Elias saw one of the figures break away, circling to get behind her. Thinking fast, Elias grabbed the water bucket and doused their fire, plunging the homestead into utter darkness. The rock throwing ceased, the attackers blinded. Elias knew this land in the dark. He moved quickly and silently, using the terrain, heading to intercept the flanker. He found the man crouched behind a boulder, preparing to ambush Brenna. Elias didn't try to fight him. Instead, he scooped up a handful of gravel and dirt and flung it hard into the man's face. The man cried out, stumbling backward. Brenna was there in a heartbeat. One precise, powerful strike, and the man crumpled. The other two fled into the night. Brenna turned to Elias, breathing heavily. You put out the fire. They were using the light to see you. I took it away. Something profound changed in her expression. She closed the distance between them in 2 strides. Suddenly, her hands were on Elias's face, tilting his head up. Her palms were warm, her touch surprisingly gentle. You saved me, she said, wonder in her voice. You did not try to be a fighter. You used your mind. That is a better strength. Elias's heart hammered. Brenna was so close. I'm not strong like you. No, Brenna agreed, her voice a low rumble. You are smart. You see what others miss. That is better. Then she leaned down and kissed him. It was gentle, questioning, a stark contrast to her warrior's exterior. Elias's world tilted. When Brenna pulled back, her eyes searched his face. Was that wrong? No, Elias managed, his voice rough. That was perfect. Brenna smiled. In that moment, with an unconscious enemy at their feet, Elias felt more right, more himself, than he ever had in his entire life. We end this, Brenna said, before Crow sends more than cowards with rocks. Elias nodded, a new hardness settling in his chest. Then we take the fight to him. They rode into the settlement at high noon, when the sun left no room for shadows. Elias on his horse, Brenna walking beside him. Her presence a silent shockwave that parted the crowd on the main street. Whispers trailed them like a poison cloud. Jedediah Crow's office was a pretentious 2-story building at the end of the street. Elias dismounted, his hand steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear anger. Brenna pushed the door open without knocking. Crow looked up from his desk, surprise flashing before being masked by his oily smile. Morgan, I thought you'd be packing. Came to discuss terms, Elias said, walking to the center of the room. Brenna took a position by the door, blocking it. My land. What's it worth to you? Crow leaned back, steepling his fingers, finally seeing sense. He slid a document across the desk. A fair price. Enough to start over somewhere more suitable. Elias picked it up. The number was an insult. This is what you call fair? It's generous, given your situation. A man living with a savage? Your bargaining position is weak, Morgan. Take the offer, or watch what's left of your life burn. I have another idea, Elias said quietly. I tell everyone how you sabotaged my correspondence with Clara, how you sent Brenna here to create a scandal, how you hired men to burn my barn, how you tried to steal my land through intimidation and fraud. Crow laughed. Who will believe you? A timid rancher and his half-breed pet against me? You'll be a laughingstock. Brenna moved faster than sight. One moment she was at the door, the next she had Crow by his fancy shirt front, lifting him clear off the floor. Crow's face went pale. Call me that again, Brenna said, her voice deadly calm. Elias pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The man from last night. He was very cooperative after he woke up. He signed a full confession. Says you hired him and his brothers. Says you ordered the barn burning. Says you promised them a cut of the land. Crow's bravado cracked. A criminal's word against mine. Maybe. Elias pulled out another paper. But I also have this. A letter from Clara. She never got my letters after the first 2. Your agency intercepted them. You lied to her, telling her I'd changed my mind. You engineered this entire situation to make me vulnerable. Sweat beaded on Crow's brow. You have no proof. I have her letters. I have your agency's records. I have a signed confession. And Elias leaned forward, his voice dropping. I have every person in this settlement watching through your window right now. Crow's eyes darted to the windows. A crowd had gathered, their faces pressed to the glass, watching the drama unfold. Here is my offer, Elias said. You sign over the deed to the water rights you've been trying to steal. You leave this territory and never return. And I don't take this evidence to the U.S. Marshal who's been investigating your land fraud schemes. You're bluffing, Crow whispered, his voice trembling. Elias smiled, a cold, hard expression. Try me. Brenna set Crow down but didn't step back. Crow looked between them, saw the trap had sprung, and broke. With shaking hands, he pulled out the water rights deed and signed it over. Get out of my territory, Elias said. Crow grabbed his coat and fled, pushing through the stunned crowd outside. Elias and Brenna stood alone in the office, the deed in Elias's hand. You planned all of that, Brenna said, looking at him with something akin to awe. You taught me that strength has many forms, Elias replied. I just used mine. Brenna kissed him then, right there in Crow's office, with half the settlement watching. And Elias kissed her back, not caring who saw. 2 weeks later, they stood by the creek on Elias's land. A traveling minister, paid handsomely to overlook the unconventional union, rushed through the vows. There were no rings, but Brenna had woven 2 bracelets from horsehair and leather. They tied them onto each other's wrists. I now pronounce you man and wife, the minister said, already edging toward his horse. He left quickly. They stood alone by the water, the rebuilt barn standing as a testament behind them. So, Brenna said, looking down at Elias. What now? Elias took her hand, the horsehair bracelet a simple, strong bond. Now, he said, we build something. Together. So, Brenna said, looking down at him with that same quiet certainty that had settled between them since the confrontation in Crow's office. What now? Now we build something, Elias said. Together, they did. Over the following months, the ranch transformed. Brenna's strength turned ambitious plans into reality. A larger, sturdier corral, a new pasture carved from the wild brush, the foundation for a bigger house laid stone by stone. Elias's gentle patience with the livestock and his deep understanding of the land's rhythms brought a prosperity that was both steady and surprising. The settlement never fully embraced them. Some still crossed the street to avoid Brenna. Whispers still followed them into the general store. But a few, a small and growing number, saw the harmony they had forged and recognized it for what it was, a loyal partnership, a bond forged in the most unlikely of fires. A letter arrived from Clara after 6 months. She had married a shopkeeper back east, she was happy, and she wished him well. Elias read it once, then held it to a candle flame and watched it curl into ash. The man who had needed a woman like Clara to feel whole was a ghost. The man he was now, standing beside a woman who could break a wild horse with her hands, but who listened to his quiet counsel as if it were law, was a man he finally respected. Brenna found her place, not with the tribe that had cast her out or the settlement that feared her, but here, on this soil, with this man who saw her strength not as a threat, but as a gift. They stood together one evening, watching the sun bleed into the horizon over the land they had fought for. Brenna's hand rested on Elias's shoulder. His arm was wrapped around her waist, and the difference in their size, once a symbol of dissonance, now felt like perfect balance. Do you ever regret it? She asked. That I was not the woman you expected. Elias looked up at the strong lines of her face, into the eyes that had seen his true self from the very first day, and smiled. Every day I am thankful you were not. She leaned down and kissed him, a gesture both gentle and sure. And in that moment, with their home thriving and their future stretching before them as wide as the territory itself, Elias Morgan finally understood what it meant to belong. Not to a plot of land, not to the approval of others, but to one single person. And that was enough. If you felt the dust of their journey, click the story on your screen now to ride into another tale from the frontier, where the most unlikely bonds are the ones that last. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. And if you'd like to help us keep the campfire burning, consider supporting the channel with a super chat. We appreciate you, partners.